The film takes place in April 1945 when the Soviet Union launches the Battle of Berlin, the final major offensive of World War II in Europe. Nazi Germany is devastated, with many buildings destroyed and smoke filling the streets. The story is told through the diary of a brave German journalist. She was part of the upper-class society because her husband was a high-ranking Nazi official. However, as Berlin falls to the Soviet Red Army, she loses her privileged lifestyle and must flee with other German citizens to an underground bunker where women, children, and the elderly seek refuge. In the bunker, the journalist recognizes familiar faces, all afraid to leave their noble positions or worried about loved ones involved in the war. The war takes a toll on the civilians, and she witnesses the tragic death of a woman due to exposure to chemical weapons used by the Soviets. In the midst of the chaos, she vows to document everything she sees for her husband. Eventually, a ceasefire is declared, and as the smoke clears, the Red Army patrols the streets in search of Germans. The journalist and the German refugees anxiously await what will happen next. Suddenly, they are caught in a hail of bullets as some surviving German soldiers fight back from balconies. Some Soviets fall, while others take cover in a dilapidated building to suppress the attackers. Major Andrea Ripken learns that many Germans have almost reached Potsdam Station but are ordered to remain in Berlin. Frustrated, the German army secures the flanks and raids underground shelters to find refugees. Some members of the Red Army discover the journalist's hiding place. She speaks to one of the soldiers in Russian, and they bring all the women to the surface. The soldiers announce that the war is over and offer them potatoes to eat. One woman, Barbel Malthouse, asks permission from a soldier before taking some potatoes. As the women emerge, they see the street surrounded by the Red Army, proudly displaying their victory. The journalist feels uneasy during the interrogation and tries to leave. However, she is stopped by a German teenager who takes her back underground. There, she witnesses soldiers sexually abusing a young girl from Silesia. Moved by compassion, she gives the girl the keys to her old penthouse and helps her escape. Later, the journalist rushes to stop a soldier from taking advantage of an elderly woman. In the process, she gets trapped in a dark room with the soldier. To escape, she lures him to a dark area and locks him in a cage. She manages to return to the surface unharmed and seeks help from Major Ripken to stop the abuse happening underground. However, she is disappointed when she is told that the men can do as they please. As the Soviets taunt her, she is sexually assaulted by one of them in a dark room. Despite her hardships, a kind German widow offers her a place to stay with other surviving civilians in an apartment complex. Outside, the Red Army celebrates their victory, but inside the complex, a woman who was also abused by a soldier shares that the Red Army plans to eliminate all Germans. During their conversation, the Soviets start banging on the apartment door, preparing to raid it for supplies and abduct the women. The journalist stays behind and is taken advantage of by another German official. These raids become a daily occurrence, and she and other women submit to the Red Army for their pleasure. After a few more days, the journalist conditions herself to satisfy the soldiers and allows her body to be used, further degrading herself. She tries to keep the spirits of the women up, assuring them that they will survive. However, during a particularly rough encounter, she reaches her breaking point and storms out of the complex, accompanied by Barbel. They go to see the commander, but she is dragged to a library where Red Army officials discuss their plans. The major dismisses his men and talks to her about the rape allegations. He tries to justify their actions by comparing them to the years of torture inflicted by the Germans. After failing to reason with him, she vows never to let a man touch her again, no matter what happens. Meanwhile, a German couple reluctantly houses a young Red Army soldier, but they fear he may harm their daughter. Eventually, the wife kicks him out to rejoin the army, but he remains stubborn, stating that all humans are flawed. The journalist returns to the apartment complex for a party, where Lieutenant Anatole invites her to fulfill his sexual desires. The soldiers enjoy themselves, expressing their disdain for the war. The German accountant Eckhart is intrigued by their energy and drinks with them. The journalist engages in a conversation with the lieutenant, who playfully flirts and exposes himself. After the party, everyone is exhausted except for Anatole, who asks her to sleep with him the next day. While walking through the war-torn streets of Berlin, the journalist is disgusted to see Major Ripken visiting the complex. She leaves immediately. In an attempt to make it up to her, Major Ripken instructs a Mongol soldier to fetch water and soap for her bath. Despite facing criticism from his Russian comrades for doing menial tasks, he obeys the journalist, his only loyal female commander. Masha, another woman in the complex, delivers the rose soap to Ripken. Initially annoyed at helping the journalist, she angrily throws the soap at her feet and declares that Berlin belongs to the Soviets. Later, Major Ripken asks everyone to leave and speaks to the journalist in private. To his surprise, she undresses without saying a word. As she stands there naked, he suddenly feels regret for not taking her concerns seriously. Despite his restraint, many of his soldiers continue to sexually abuse German women, considering them their property. By a campfire, he overhears them boasting about their exploits, losing sight of the reality brutality of the war. Meanwhile, as the journalist continues to document her experiences, she is visited by Anatole, whom she describes as a gypsy who comes and goes as he pleases. The next day, Major Ripken returns to the busy complex with supplies like meat, bread, and sugar to cook for the German soldiers. Eckhart and Anonymous entertain them happily, while her Russian language skills improve. After a lively conversation, they toast to her cleverness and establish a friendship between the Germans and Russians. Suddenly, another group from the Red Army storms into the complex on orders from Lieutenant Andropov, searching for a young soldier who had been stealing food. This soldier happens to be the same boy staying in the penthouse with the female refugee from Silesia. When asked about the penthouse, Anonymous insists it is empty, even though the major is suspicious. Despite this, one of the soldiers becomes furious and beats up an elderly resident to force him to talk. Ripken comes downstairs and fights him until a Mongol soldier holds him back when he tries to shoot the furious soldier in the head. Ripken then orders the execution of anyone found with firearms and the destruction of their houses. As the crowd disperses, he goes into the bedroom with Anonymous to be intimate with her. Later, when he leaves, she rushes to the penthouse to warn the girl but finds the young soldier hiding, refusing to go back to Siberia. From then on, Major Ripken frequently visits the complex, offering protection while taking various items from the widow's collection. During their sexual encounters, he becomes more open with Anonymous, showing her his passport, bank account, and names of his relatives. Unbeknownst to him, Anatole secretly meets up with her for sexual intercourse, which makes her question if she has become a prostitute. Meanwhile, the Red Army slowly helps replace the furniture and fix the interior of the complex, while the women continue to please them. They later celebrate the news of Benito Mussolini's execution while carrying buckets of water. The next day, Anonymous runs into an old friend named Elk, who has been out of town while her husband continues his duties in Siberia. She brings Elk to the complex to have tea with the female residents and catch up on each other's lives. With the Russians, the women excitedly share their sexual encounters, with one of them expressing concern about contracting syphilis from a soldier. Later, Anonymous visits the major in his study and realizes that he has fallen in love with her, as Russians appreciate intelligent women. It is April 30th, 1945, and Barble takes her to meet a group of soldiers. One of them asks her to translate his story about witnessing Germans looting a village and brutally murdering all the children. Disturbed by what she hears, she leaves and runs into Major Ripken, who tells her that the Nazis' hold on Germany is nearly over with the death of Adolf Hitler. Later, Masha approaches Anonymous and warns her to stay away from Major Ripken, revealing that the Nazis hanged his wife. Shortly after this, General Breitling announces the immediate cessation of all fighting as Berlin is finally defeated. The streets are filled with joyous celebrations, and the Soviet Union's national anthem is played for everyone. In the midst of the Red Army's revelry, Masha kisses the major. Meanwhile, Friedrich feels hopeless at home and confesses to his wife that he desires to join the German troops in Siberia. Despite her protests, he believes that no one will be able to protect their family once he leaves. With the war over, the friendly group of Russians returns to the complex bearing gifts, including dried halibut. Major Ripken then plays a tune on the piano before visiting Anonymous in her bedroom. They look out the window and see the soldiers putting up a banner with Joseph Stalin's picture. The major explains to her that around 1 million female Soviets enlisted in the army, fearing that their beauty would fade after dying in battle. Meanwhile, a drunk soldier goes up to the penthouse and tries to take advantage of the refugee girl, resulting in a scuffle with the young soldier. The drunk soldier is pushed off the stairway and dies. The commotion attracts everyone in the stairway, and Anonymous confesses that the penthouse belongs to her. The refugee girl declares her allegiance to Hitler and is subsequently executed. Lieutenant Andropov orders the mayor to punish the women, but he refuses, leading Andropov to report the incident to Stalin. The celebration continues outside, but the mayor is clearly fed up. He interrupts Anatole's routine visit by giving him a bike and urging him to leave. Then he gathers all the residents in one room to celebrate Hitler's demise by drinking and singing. Anonymous decides to spend time alone with the mayor to ease his mind and calls him by his first name. Later, they join the others in dancing as the party becomes more intense, with most of the participants already drunk. Eckhart discusses with another resident the rise of the Soviet Union's power now that the Nazis are defeated. Friedrich appears but hesitates to join in and eventually returns to his home. Later, as the party comes to an end, Major Ripken and Anonymous have a conversation about their thoughts and emotions regarding the end of the war. Anonymous confesses that despite the war being over, she will continue to wait for her husband to come back to her. As Major Ripken tries to leave, she passionately kisses him and they spend the night together. The next morning, Anonymous goes to visit Hills and discovers that her husband Friedrich took his own life by swallowing poison. Distraught, she rushes back to Major Ripken, but is surprised to find Lieutenant Andropov with her husband Gert instead. The lieutenant informs her that Major Ripken will be relocated relocating to an undisclosed location and leaves her a note. Gert confronts her, clearly disappointed by the current situation in their former home. After preparing food for him, Anonymous gives him a letter she wrote in her diary about her experiences. However, he ends up disliking what he reads, so she leaves in a state of confusion to witness Major Ripken being discharged from the 8th Company. Although heartbroken, he thanks her for their time together and departs. Feeling lost and unsure of how to move forward, Anonymous returns to find her husband attempting to arrange the old furniture in their penthouse, only to realize that it is a futile effort. 2 days later, he leaves without any intention of returning, and she finds herself wandering the streets once again to gather water. The movie concludes by informing us that when her diary was finally published in Germany in 1959, it was either ignored or criticized, leading the anonymous author to refuse the publication of another edition during her lifetime. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.